Now, when it comes to whether to sit or start a rookie quarterback in the NFL, kind of the prevailing wisdom for so many years, the old school way of thinking is that it's better to sit them because they can learn, they can grow as a person, a player, a leader, they can observe the way things are done at the NFL level, they can pick up the NFL game and the NFL speed that way, so on and so forth. And I understand why this has been the prevailing logic for so long. There used to be tremendous differences in the college game versus the NFL. A lot of times when you looked at the NFL based off of the simplicity of what a lot of college teams did in the passing game between that and what the NFL did in the passing game, and also what was expected out of quarterbacks. They were much more the play callers and much more involved in the weekly game plan than they are now. You needed time to mature and learn and grow and understand how things were done at the NFL because a lot of ways the difference between the college and NFL game was night and day. And that led to the whole mindset of the best way to learn is to sit because so many things come at you so fast at the NFL level compared to the college level that you throw somebody in immediately, they can get overwhelmed, they can get buried, get shell shocked, and oftentimes the fear being that they may not recover. And I get all this, and I understand why this is that kind of old school mentality or that common kind of prevailing wisdom, especially amongst a lot of NFL front offices and head coaches and so on and so forth. And I get it, and it's completely and totally freaking ridiculous and just so wrong on so many different levels. Sometimes the old school way of thinking is the old school way of thinking. It's the way things used to be, but no longer are. Just because that's how it was once done doesn't mean that it was right then. And it most certainly doesn't make it right for the here, now, and the future. Let's look at this really quickly. In a lot of ways, where it used to be the college game languished behind the NFL in offense and defensive philosophies and systems and schemes and plays and approaches, you could almost say the inverse is true now. The NFL, in some ways, is catching up with the college game and is behind the college game. It is the NFL that is adapting and adjusting to what is being done at the college football level. It's not college football trying to adjust and change to what the NFL is doing. In a lot of ways now, whereas opposed to in the past, for all those years, it used to be the NFL was an entirely different ball game. Now the NFL, if anything, is just more of an extension of the college game because there has been a conscientious approach by NFL organizations to come more lockstep in line with what college teams are doing. So this whole notion that these games are tremendously different between college and the NFL is ridiculous. With the emphasis on the passing game and the number of teams that run spread passing systems at the college level and read option, spread option type of running systems at the college level. Look at how many teams after college started doing it, started incorporating it at the NFL level. So when you've got young quarterbacks, there really isn't that much of a change fundamentally in the systems that they ran in college to what they will encounter at the NFL like there used to be. Everybody runs some version of the West Coast offense. Everybody runs some version of read option. Everybody runs some version of the spread. This is not unique and totally owned by the NFL anymore. And this whole notion that the game is that much different is astoundingly stupid. Yes, maybe the speed is faster, the players are better, I will grant you that, but the fundamental belief that there's a massive gap and gulf and difference in the games is just out of date. And then when we talk about the thing of needing to sit, and that's the best way to learn, you have three real basic types of learning styles. You've got audio, visual, and kinesthetic, kind of hands-on, doing it, however you want to put it. Some people learn best, they feel, by hearing things or having things told to them. Some people learn best, they feel, by seeing. Like seeing is believing, seeing is learning. And those can be helpful learning styles and learning devices. But at the end of the day, no matter how many people think they're audio learners, no matter how many people think they are visual learners, at the end of the day, we ultimately all are, as human beings, kinesthetic, hands-on learners. Everything audio and visual funnels into the hands-on element. This is an unequivocal fact. Any of you that have ever went through, let's say, 4, 5, 6 weeks of training for a company that you work for now or in the past, maybe you thought you'd learn better by listening to things, hearing things. Maybe you thought you learned better by seeing them up close. But at the end of the day, as you went through all of that training and you thought, I guess I'm ready to go, then you hit the floor, you hit the warehouse running or wherever the hell you're working. You realize how much you didn't actually know and you didn't really start to learn until you started actually doing it. You learn through the repetition of the job and its responsibilities and the skills required and the processes and the procedures. Every little thing that you learned in the classroom was maybe 1/10 of the total learning because you learned the rest of it hands-on, on the fly as you did the job. And being an NFL starting quarterback is no different. No matter how well these guys study in the film room, no matter how much these guys work their ass off in practice, they read study and learn the playbooks and other teams' defenses and tendencies and all this crap. At the end of the day, they can sit there and watch games from the sideline. But the only way you're really truly going to learn is you have to piece all of that together by actually applying your craft and doing it. You have to at some point in time. So why would you delay that learning curve by not having people go out there and try it as soon as possible? Maybe they do fall flat on their face initially. Maybe they do sink immediately. But that's the only way you can find out potentially what that person is made of and whether or not they've really got that stuff. Having them sit on the sidelines, you're just delaying the inevitable. At some point in time, you're going to have to throw them into the fire any damn ways. And on top of that, sitting is not necessarily a guarantee of success by any stretch of the imagination. I know when people talk about quarterbacks over the years that have sat and learned for a year or two behind somebody else and they were better off for it in theory. Guys like Steve McNair and Carson Palmer and Phillip Rivers, Chad Pennington, Dante Culpepper, Aaron Rodgers. Those are some notable examples. But is there real strong empirical scientific evidence that these guys needed to sit in order to become franchise NFL quarterbacks, starting caliber NFL quarterbacks, in the case of Aaron Rodgers, for sure, a Hall of Fame quarterback? Is there any real hard-on proof that sitting and learning for 1, 2, or in the case of Aaron Rodgers, 3 years, made them any more or less prepared to be a starting quarterback at the NFL level? It's all subjective, it's all theory, and frankly, it's all bullshit to assert that that would be the case. Because if I sat there and said that, I would say Brady Quinn, sitting the majority of his first 2 years in the league, should have had him prepared to go on to have multiple Pro Bowl seasons, and it didn't. Rex Grossman barely started his first year. He sat and learned most of the year, and he sucked. Jamarcus Russell sat the majority of his rookie year. I know you might think that's a bad example, but we're talking about sitting helping, guys. He sat the majority of his rookie year due to holdout and then not playing right away. Jake Locker was redshirted pretty much his rookie year in 2011. J.P. Losman, for the most part, was redshirted his rookie year in 2004. All of these guys sat for the most part of a year, maybe a little bit longer, and they all washed out. They all crapped out at the NFL level. If we follow this whole logic that sitting and learning that way is the best way to go, then all these guys should have been successful NFL starting quarterbacks. But that's not the case. And the reason being is because that logic is ridiculous. You look at Steve McNair and Carson Palmer, Phillip Rivers, Chad Pennington, Dante Culpepper, Aaron Rodgers. To all varying levels and degrees, they had what it took to be a starting quarterback at the NFL level. When you look at Brady Quinn, Rex Grossman, Jamarcus Russell, Jake Locker, J.P. Losman, they just didn't. They just weren't good enough. They just didn't have it. If these guys would have been thrown into the fire right away, they probably would have sunk, just like they did when they waited. They still sunk. Whereas with Steve McNair and Carson Palmer and Aaron Rodgers, if you threw these guys into the mix, maybe they stumbled immediately, maybe they sink a little bit. But I think the talent and the work ethic and ability would overcome that, and they still would have swam. And they might have been better off earlier in their career if they had been given the chance right away. And this whole notion that starting right away is too overwhelming and this and that, I talk about it earlier in this video and I mentioned it again. with the way that the college game has sped up and passed by the NFL in terms of so many of its different, in particular, offensive philosophies. And the way the NFL game has opened up because the defenses can't do this and they can't do this and they can't do this and they can't do that, starting right away doesn't have to be detrimental at all. Look in the past, Peyton Manning, hell, his rookie year, he threw, 26, 28 picks? I mean, he's going to the Hall of Fame, first ballot. Top 5 to 7 quarterback of all time. Big Ben started at, once Tommy Maddox got hurt, the majority of his rookie season. The Steelers went 15-1. Yeah, they had to mask him and they had to hide him. But Big Ben won 2 Super Bowls now. He's going to the Hall of Fame. He helped lead his team to the NFC Championship game as a rookie. By year 2, they were winning the Super Bowl. Matt Ryan came in right away in 2008. Led the Falcons to the playoffs. Joe Flacco for the Baltimore Ravens, same deal. Cam Newton, first overall pick in 2011. He started right away, day 1. And now he's one of the 5 elite quarterbacks in the National Football League. 2012, number 1 overall pick, Andrew Luck. This is a guy that was drafted number 1 overall. His first 3 years in the league, he took his team to the playoffs, and each year they progressed around further into the playoffs. And Jameis Winston, last year's number 1 overall pick. Would he have really been better off sitting for half the season or most of the season? Marcus Mariota, would he have been better off sitting for the majority of the season? No, that makes no fucking sense. That makes absolutely no sense. And sure, you've had guys that started right away like David Carr and Joey Harrington and Matt Leinart and Mark Sanchez. But look at the names. Look at the skill sets or the lack of NFL skill sets. Those guys didn't make it because they weren't good enough. It doesn't matter if you sat Joey Harrington on the bench for 8 goddamn years. He was not going to be an NFL franchise quarterback. Mark Sanchez, same thing. Matt Leinart, same thing. David Carr, same thing. Whether they started right away or sat, really frankly made no difference. So if it makes no difference, why not throw them into the fire right away and see what the hell you've got? Because the quicker you find out, the quicker you know, and the quicker you know, the quicker you're able to determine where your organization is headed now and in the future. Which brings me to the Los Angeles Rams and Jared Goff. The Los Angeles Rams entered the 2016 NFL Draft with the number 15 pick. And ultimately, they traded up to number 1. They traded up to number 1 for a reason. They wanted a quarterback. And that organization had graded a quarterback worthy of the number 1 overall pick. And ultimately, after making that big trade and giving up all of those picks and making that big move up from 15-1, the Los Angeles Rams drafted Jared Goff number 1 overall. Because wrongly, but they still did, that organization felt that he was the best quarterback in the 2016 NFL Draft. You traded up for a reason. You took this guy for a reason. So you don't play him right away. The best way to learn is to play. It's just like the real world. It's just like sports in general. Do you really learn how to play baseball by sitting? Or do you learn by seeing live pitching and seeing real game situations up close and intimately personal because you're actually playing? Do guys in basketball really get a whole lot better by sitting their asses on the bench for years? No, at some point in time, they got to get on the floor and they got to play. They got to figure it out them goddamn selves. The best way to learn is to play, is to do it hands-on, period. And to assert anything other than that is complete madness and old-school stupidity. It's not 3 yards in a cloud of dust football anymore. Get fucking over with. And especially as much as the quarterback position and offenses in general are micromanaged by today's offensive coordinators and general managers, you take so much of the potential risk out of the game for the quarterbacks any goddamn ways. You play that young guy and you figure out how to get the most out of him and put him in the best situations. That's what good coaches and good coaching staffs do. And especially many recent top-ranked, top-picked quarterbacks have played effective immediately. Matt Ryan did, Cam Newton did, Andrew Luck did, Jameis Winston did. Did they need to sit? No, that's ridiculous. Those teams took them for a reason and they played them and they were better off for different varying lengths of time and still are better off in some cases because they did. And especially in today's salary cap environment of the NFL, for salary cap reasons alone, it's incredibly important to play these guys right away if at all possible. Because when you're talking about that young quarterback you took number 1 overall, you've got no more than 5 years. At the very most, if you pick up that 5th-year option, 5 years of this guy under his rookie deal. And more likely than not, 3 to 4. Don't you want to have as much of a body of work as possible to be able to assess where you stand, where that player stands, and where you stand with him going forward before you make that decision to plunge all of that money into a guy? By sitting him for a year or two, you're only potentially getting 1 or 2 years on the field to know what that guy's going to be one way or another. It's what made the thing kind of complicated with the Broncos and Brock Osweiler. In 4 years, they got like 7 starts out of him. They didn't fucking know one way or another. So maybe they should have thrown more money at him and made it clear to him that this is the place he needed to be. But maybe they shouldn't have. But at the end of the day, their circumstance, the situation was different because they were a contending team, granted. But at the end of the day, they didn't know because they didn't play the guy. And when you have the chance and no real reason not to, you must play that guy as quickly as possible, because if you have made a mistake, it is better to figure out that it is a sunken cost and acknowledge that mistake and own that mistake and learn from that mistake and move on from that mistake as quickly as possible, and not sink your organization even longer by hoping that this guy ends up living up to being something that he was never meant to be. And on top of that, not only due to salary cap ramifications and salary structures ramifications, but in terms of the investment you made in terms of draft pick currency over the next couple of drafts, it mandates that so much of your drafts are tied up into this one guy at this one position. You have to get a maximum return on that as early as possible. That's not some fan bullshit. That is reality. It's ridiculous to sit there and say that you think you're going to get a better return on your investment by not playing the guy right away or not playing him his entire rookie year. Just because Jeff Fisher sat Steve McNair from Alcorn State 20 plus years ago in the 90s NFL does not mean it's okay to sit Jared Goff for an entire season in 2016 NFL. It just doesn't. Furthermore, on top of that, if you get into a situation where your team is struggling and the veterans that are manning the position are not doing well, not getting the job done, you run the risk of losing the team, losing the locker room, because they can't understand why this veteran who can't play is still playing over the young guy who maybe can play, maybe who can't play, but we don't know, and we would like to find out because we know what we've got here and it's not good. You run the risk of losing the locker room because you're an idiot. On top of that, if you're the Los Angeles Rams, you orchestrated that big move up from 15-1, gave up all those picks, and then took Jared Goff for a reason, in large part because of the other 2 quarterbacks on your roster, Case Keenum and Sean Mannion, aren't the answer, and you know it. So you already knew that these 2 guys aren't it. You know they're not the long-term answer. Why? Because you did what you did to get Jared Goff in the first fucking place. So why the hell would you not play this guy immediately? And frankly, based off of what you just saw Monday night when they got shut out by the 49ers, you got to sit there and say to yourself, fuck, Jared Goff could have done that. And at least if he did that, he would have been on the field and learning and growing from that experience. You would have a starting point. What the fuck did Jared Goff learn from sitting on the bench Monday night other than the fact that his coach is an idiot and Case Keenum and that Los Angeles Rams offense, minus Todd Gurley and sometimes Tavon Austin, absolutely, completely fucking sucks? He learned nothing. The only way he is going to learn is by playing. The only chance the Rams have to be relevant this year is by Jared Goff playing. Period. Because, once again, if you thought Case Keenum and or Sean Mannion were capable of being the guy, you wouldn't have traded up that much to get to number 1 to take Jared Goff to fucking begin with. And on top of this, it reminds me a couple of years ago I was talking about with Blake Bortles and Teddy Bridgewater. Similar with situations like Chad Henne in Jacksonville and Matt Castle in Minnesota respectively. There's a reason you took the young quarterbacks in round 1. And you now reach a point where these other guys that are starting ahead of them are veterans and they're journeymen, and you know what they are, and they're not going to get better. They are not going to grow and improve. At which point in time, if they're here and the rookie's basically here, does it no longer make sense to sit the rookie? Because if that rookie learns anything at all, if he grows or gets any better at all, he is instantly, immediately going to be better than that veteran in his upside, and his trajectory is pointing much more upward than that middling veteran backup type quarterback who's trending this way. The longer the Rams go without starting Jared Goff, is the longer they do themselves a disservice and the longer they do Jared Goff and his career a disservice. To sit there and try to spin this bill of goods that it's a good idea, I don't care how bad he looked in the offseason and in training camp and the preseason. You saw how bad Case Keenum looked on Monday night. Jared Goff can't really look much worse than that. And if anything, he could only look better than that. If the Rams don't hurry up and start Jared Goff, they run the risk of not only losing this season, but potentially negatively impacting Jared Goff for the long term. Because if your offense stinks and he didn't get on the field, now that could potentially kill his confidence because he'd be like, I couldn't start over Case fucking Keenum, or God forbid, I couldn't even beat out Sean Mannion to be the second string quarterback. The Rams are stupid for not starting Jared Goff because Jeff Fisher is stupid. He's a clown, and he has no clue how to handle the quarterback position. And by him continuing to sit Jared Goff, all he does is prove all of those things that I just said about him are 100% true.